Alright, everybody. I'd like to take some time today and talk about the Walkaway movement. I've ignored it for thus far because I really feel like it was something that I did years ago, and I didn't like the fact that it was starting to become a fad. But at this point, it's become so large that I can't ignore it anymore. And a part of that comes from the fact that I was actually directly asked about it not that long ago. Now, various people have already been talking about Walkaway, and as I've already mentioned, it's something that I kind of let fall to the wayside, because I did it back on Obama's first primary run. Back then, I didn't really feel the need to advertise it. I just kind of went about my business, as I would hope that anybody else who was going to walk away from the Democrat Party would do. But as the trending hashtag started to grow, and as news coverage started to follow it, and as alt media started to talk about it constantly, it became something that was too large to let go. So today I'd like to talk about the walkaway movement and being red-pilled, because they're two things that are very different, but they're used very interchangeably in today's society and today's political atmosphere. Let's take a second and start with talking about being red-pilled. If you take some time and start looking through various alt media sources, most of them have a video out there that explains how they got red-pilled. One of my favorite videos on how I got red-pilled was by YouTube commenter and half of the podcast Beauty and the Beta, Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, in which she explains that she was just seeing more and more problems with the corporate sector and the Democrat Party itself, and she decided that she wanted to take her life in a different direction. I've been watching her podcast for a while, and some of her videos for just about as long, and honestly, I think Blonde was one of the people that got hit the hardest with the red pill moment, because she went from being an outright lefty, as she has said in many of her videos, to straight up repeal the 19th level of go back to 1950s conservatism. Most of us didn't go that far. But with that being said, I think that being red-pilled is confused for something else entirely. I think in common society right now, being red-pilled means that you went from voting Democrat for voting Republican. And with the idea of what being red-pilled means, the way that the political map looks, I could see why this is being confusing. But it's definitely not at all what being red-pilled is. Let's first take a look and figure out where the origins of the word came from.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
As you saw in this clip from The Matrix, taking the red pill meant that Neo was going to learn what the real world was all about, and he was going to be stuck in the real world after his perception changes about it. In the lore of the trilogy, when you are plugged into the Matrix and still asleep in the pod where you're dreaming about the world that's presented to you, the red pill adds a carrier wave and interrupts your input-output signal for the battery system that the machines are using to charge themselves with. It separates your mind from the collective dream of the Matrix, both waking you up from the pod and giving them a tracer signal where the operators of the ship could go and find you, therefore allowing you to survive and become a part of the, quote, real world. When you look at this and you look at the way that our political atmosphere is going, especially with the authoritarian shift in the Democrat Party over the last 3 election cycles, it's easy to draw the parallels between the two. When you're in the Matrix, you are a part of a system. You're not necessarily individual or free, even though you have the illusion of having both. You're asleep in a pod where the machines are using your bioelectric energy to generate electricity, which they use to charge their circuits. While you're in the pod, the machines feed you and make sure that you grow normally, but you are in general not free. You live in the world that the machines have set forth for you, and everything that you do depends on the way that they present the world to you. When you get red-pilled in today's political establishment, it means that you've started to look beyond what was presented to you. You knew there was something better going on, again drawing parallels to the Matrix movies themselves, but you've been a part of a system for almost your entire life. The theme of the Matrix was that everything boiled down to the fact that you were given a choice. In order for the system to work the way it was, human beings had to be given a choice. If they were forced into the Matrix and no way out of it, human beings rejected it, and it destroyed entire segments of their population. But for the most part, most of the humans that were hooked up to the Matrix just wanted to go through, live their lives from cradle to grave, and not really question the system at all.
You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.
In the movie, these were called blue pills, and in today's political establishment, most of the people who are out there just living their lives from day to day and from week to week, from cradle to grave, are again called blue pills. For the most part, they have no intention to buck the system. They just kind of want to live and die and go from beginning to end. The red pills are the people that got up and decided that they wanted to change something. As I mentioned before, being red-pilled commonly means, throughout most circles, that you've just decided that it was time to start voting Republican. And I don't necessarily believe that's true either. When you're blue-pilled, you're really into the corporate grind. I've noticed that a lot. Even not working in a corporate system, I've always worked for small businesses. I see the people that are working in the corporate grind. The movie Office Space was a very, very good example of that. The majority of people out there feel that they need to go through high school, go to college, and then just fall into whatever random finance job that they do for the rest of their lives. They don't really question it, it's just what they're expected to do. The expectation after that is to go out and reproduce and try to tuck away enough money that you can retire at the end of all of this, and also put your children through the same system so they go out, go through high school, feel expected to go to college, and fall into yet another corporate job, and the cycle continues. It keeps a status quo, and it keeps a very verifiable ruling class over the top of everybody. It limits freedom, and with the socialist authoritarianism that is in power in the Democrat Party right now, it's very easy to conflate being blue-pilled and being attached to the system with just being an everyday American, and voting for the Democrats that are in power right now helps exacerbate the system and helps keep it comfortable for everybody who's attached to the system. I've been explaining the difference between the two of these because I don't necessarily believe that being red-pilled necessarily means for voting for a Republican. I look back to the year 2000, when I had to give my speech to defend my best friend and also defend individual liberty versus a democratic mob mentality that was my entire high school. I really feel like that was the moment that I got red-pilled. From that moment, I started talking a lot about anarchy. I started talking a lot about keep the government away from me. I talked a lot about how do I keep from paying taxes, because I didn't feel that my money was going towards anything that I felt or believed in. In spite of that, in part because of my union upbringing and all of the information that had been presented to me up to that point, I did continue to support Democrats, and I even voted for John Kerry in the 2004 election. At the time, I was very, very red-pilled, but I still chose to vote Democrat. I was still trying to find a way to get out of the system, all the while being placed into a position collegiately where I was going to be forced back into the system. In stark contrast, while I was starting out in my adult life, I was dating a woman named Cheryl. Cheryl had been voting Republican for her entire adult life, but she was far from being red-pilled. I don't necessarily try to attribute a lot of merit to anything that Hillary Clinton says, but when Hillary Clinton said that a lot of the women that voted against her in the 2016 election were only doing so because of pressure from their fathers or husbands, she was talking about my ex-girlfriend. Between the fact that her father was a stark Tea Partier and myself being kind of active in the conservative movement and starting to write about being a conservative, Cheryl just kind of did whatever the men in her life told her to do. And a part of that was voting for a Republican every time an election came up, no matter what, without question. So in spite of the fact that she had always voted Republican, Cheryl was very blue-pilled. And I don't talk to her anymore, so I can't answer for it, but I do definitely feel that that is still true today. So where does this attribute to the Walkaway movement and the reason that I wanted to make this video? I was specifically asked about the Walkaway movement because I've talked at length about how I walked away in 2008 when I started having credible proof that Barack Obama wanted to do a massive redistributionist state, and I realized that that was economic authoritarianism and I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. I started to take notice about the hashtag Walkaway while I was looking on Twitter and I saw it show up in the trending, and I started to explore it just a little bit. In fact, one of the first comments that I made when I saw somebody talking about it was the fact that I did it 10 years prior without feeling the need to make a hashtag about it. And even at that time, I started to express some frustration of the fact that people did want to make a hashtag about it. And there's a reason that I have a lot of frustration with the fact that it's becoming a movement and not necessarily a mass collection of people who are starting to think for themselves, unfortunately. I'm going to come out on full disclosure and say that I am happy that the Walkaway movement is happening. It may be just in personal interest, but the people who are walking away from the Democrat Party are planning to vote in the upcoming 2018 midterm for people whose views I support wholly and thoroughly. And I think a lot of the people that are leading the movement are generally doing so for the right reasons. I think that a lot of the people that started pushing the Walkaway hashtag around for the very first time went through a similar experience to what I did back in 2008. I think the people that are at the top of the movement are very red-pilled, but I don't think everybody in the movement is. One of the problems with having a mass movement like Walkaway is the fact that it does lend itself to some mob mentality. I've done some writing on the experience of mob mentality and some of the mentality that came out of it that's starting to come around the Trump movement. Given the things that Donald Trump has done while he's been in office for the last 2 years, I really appreciate everybody that went out and voted for him and helped get him elected in a landslide. But that being said, I've been noticing more and more on Twitter and social media that a lot of the Democrat converts that decided that they wanted to jump on the Trump train and try and push the movement further and further forward did bring a lot of their bad habits over from the Democrat side. Part of that is the groupthink, and part of that is the political pressure that surrounds it. I know that the bad apples that are causing the problems and hurling the insults and trying to push themselves into a mob mentality over Trump are in the minority of the people who voted for Trump over this last cycle. But they are the bad apples that the Democrat establishment and the mainstream media are going to jump on to try and paint all of us Trump voters as the same kind of people. Unfortunately, I see a lot of the same things that come with the Walkaway movement. Part of the fear that I have of the fact that the Walkaway movement is a trending hashtag and it has thousands of people join the movement every day is the fact that I fear that it will turn into a mob mentality and that people won't really know what they're walking away from and just be kowtowing to political pressure. They see something cool, so they want to go out and do what their friends are doing, essentially. One of the big things that I want to say about the Walkaway movement is the fact that it's nothing new. You guys have been around for almost as long as there have been Democrat elections, going all the way back to Greece, for that matter. It's just up until the Walkaway movement started having a trending hashtag, you were called swing voters. And believe it or not, you have been the focus of every single Democrat election, again going back to ancient times. There is a base of core constituents out there on both sides, both Democrat and Republican, that will vote for their party no matter what down the line, no matter what anybody says to them, and no matter what facts are presented to them. In fact, many of them will shout down any other facts that are presented to them because it destroys the narrative that they're holding up. These are base voters, and part of the problem that Hillary Clinton had going into the 2016 election is that she believed that the base that she had was very much larger and across a bigger swath of land than it actually was. Political candidates do a lot of campaigning to their bases. They use their bases to rile themselves up and rile the people up around them. But the reality of a political election is the fact that anybody who's in politics already has their base. The people who are in play are the swing voters. The people like the Walkaway movement who have decided that they can't support one party or another for one reason or another. And one important thing to note about swing voters, or Walkaway members as they're called now, is the fact that no matter which side is in power, the people who are in the swing are generally going to stick with the party that is the most moderate at the time of the election. Styx and Brady Leonard of the No Gimmicks podcast both like to talk about the fact that the Republican Party did go through a major rebuilding throughout the Obama years, and I can't deny them of that. In wartime during the Bush years, with the memory of 9/11 still hard in people's memories, the political right got very comfortable with the fact that they were being in power, and they kept creeping further and further to the right. They kept creeping in that direction to the point where it became almost impossible for them to reach out to anybody on the left anymore, and more people fell away from them, and that was very, very clearly demonstrated by the popularity of Barack Obama, a man who was a senator and also knew how to talk to people and work the crowds in order to gin up support for his ideas. As I talk about in my videos discussing Barack Obama, Barack himself was very far to the left, but he was very capable of making himself look moderate and towards the center, and appealing to people who were not extremely to the left as he was, and as some of his successors have attempted to be. But throughout the Obama years, the Democrat Party began to move further and further left, further towards socialism and full-on communism, and they got very comfortable being in power. Just like during the Bush years, more and more people got alienated by the fact that the party in power was moving further and further away from center, and they started to fall off and move towards the other side. But there's been an interesting phenomenon going on throughout the Trump years, and a part of that is the fact that the political left didn't learn over the fact that Donald Trump was elected. Mostly in a response to the fact that the political left was moving so far to the left. They have doubled down at this point and tried to move further and further left. And the further and further left they go, they continue to alienate more and more people who are deciding to join this movement and form a mob that goes in the other direction. And a lot of this is good and bad. Now, I understand this late in the video that a lot of this video seems like I'm really ragging on the Walkaway movement. And I can understand where you're coming from with that, if you believe that. But there are some definite advantages that come with having a Walkaway movement. Now, I'm not in the head of anybody who is a Republican. All I can go on is what they're campaigning on. But most of the people who are running on Republican tickets this time around are focusing on lower taxes, smaller government, and giving individual liberty back to the people. While I hated the rhetoric around the ACA of you have to pass it to see what's in it, it was already written and you could have just released that out to the public. As far as interpersonal relations and politicians, you really do have to put them in power to see what they're going to do, and hold them accountable the next time there's an election if they do what you don't want them to do. But if we take these Republican politicians at their word and consider the fact that everybody that's in the Walkaway movement intends to vote for them in the upcoming midterm and upcoming presidential election, then we have a very good opportunity to show the authoritarian socialists that are in control of the Democrat Party right now that their ideas are not welcome in the country. It's going to take them getting voted out of office to realize, but it will give them a chance to break down, rebuild, and potentially go back to a JFK or a William J. Clinton-esque candidate who is going to be more to the center and more of a blue dog Democrat rather than an outright communist or socialist, as some of the people who are running have run on. And I do legitimately believe that the Democrats are either going to fail and fall apart as a party and have a new party come in their place, or they will learn this lesson and regroup and become a more moderate party. The Republican reign that's going on right now is not going to be the 1,000-year blessed reign that the book of Revelations has promised us. Republicans are going to get very comfortable with the fact that they are in power and continue to try to pull the line further and further to the right, and the Republicans are going to come back out of power in my lifetime and in most of our lifetimes. That's just how the system works, and it's been going on for 242 years in this country. And ultimately, the Walkaway movement provides another big opportunity in our society as a whole. And that relates directly to anybody else that's out there in the alt media, myself included. I didn't start this channel to tell people how to vote, or what to think for that matter. You are an individual if you're watching this, and you have the right to think whatever it is that you want, and I have no right to tell you that you can't think it. I can tell you that it's wrong, I can tell you that I don't agree with it, but I have no right to tell you that you're not allowed to think it. I can only present the facts as I see them and allow you to draw your own conclusions based on the facts that are out there. And I would hope that you would reach out and find other sources other than myself or whichever other alt media figure that you follow in order to get all the facts and draw your own conclusions. That's a part of the reason that I sign off of my channel the way I do. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. There are a lot of people out there that do want to tell you what to think and how to vote, and tell you that if you don't fall in line with them, that what you think is wrong. And that's not what this channel is about at all. Styx, Matt Christensen, Blonde, for the most part Crowder, Razorfist, these are all people that follow the same pattern that I have been following as I started this channel, and even back as far as when I started writing my blog. We live in a country where the mainstream media wants to tell you how to think. Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, C-SPAN, and even local news outlets are all guilty of this practice. And most of us understand the fact that some of you are not going to agree with us, and some of you are never going to come over to our side and our way of thinking. But some of you will. Part of what I'm seeing that surrounds the Walkaway movement is the fact that people are starting to distrust mainstream media outlet sources, and a lot of the people who are joining the movement are starting to reach out and find channels like this one that present the facts and let everybody else draw their own conclusions and find out for themselves what it is that they think and believe. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to free more minds and show more people out there that they've been duped by a two-party system and people trying to organize them into a base and keep them as numbers rather than ideas and constituents. We're in a political system right now where just about every office out there comes down to a choice of one of two people, a Democrat and a Republican. And you have to choose for yourself to vote for the person whose party or whose personal campaign promises closest meet your needs. But fortunately, we are in a society where we are not legally bound to one party or the other. And we don't necessarily have to treat the people that we vote for as kings or gods. They are human, they are fallible, and they are going to make mistakes going down the road. The decision is on us to decide whether those mistakes are forgivable or whether we have to hold them accountable and take them out of office. The mainstream media and a lot of the politicians that are in power, however, would like you to believe that there is another system in place, a system in which you are bound to the party that you've chosen to vote for, and you're not welcome in the other party, and you're wrong, especially that's the bad one, that you're wrong if you think the wrong way and you're trying to be in one party. Democrats and Republicans alike are guilty of this practice, trying to shame people that don't believe the same way that they do. The Walkaway movement gives myself and many other alt-media figures the ability to try and free some minds and let people decide for themselves what it is that they believe and what's important to them and how to achieve it in society, both politically and personally. The Walkaway movement probably has its problems, but I am definitely glad it's there, and a lot of the good is going to outweigh a lot of the bad that goes with it. What do you think about the Walkaway movement? Are you in it? Did you join it before now? Are you joining it afterwards, and did you make a hashtag for it? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlogTwitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.